The Japan Society of Ultrasonics in Medicine and the Japan Association of Breast and Thyroid Sonology have developed the thyroid ultrasound and have made a significant contribution to clinical practice. I would like to discuss the development of this method, the impact of thyroid ultrasound in children on the Fukushima disaster, and what we should do in the future. Thyroid cancer, especially papillary carcinoma, has a wide spectrum of clinical manifestations, although histological findings are consistent. In addition, there are many tumors that are characterized by lymph node metastasis, but are not lethal. It is unlike most cancers. On the other hand, malignant thyroid tumors include anaplastic carcinoma, which have extremely high proliferative potential. The wide spectrum of thyroid malignancies has a tendency to lead to overdiagnosis and overtreatment. The annual trend of incidence rates and mortality of thyroid cancer in Japan show that while mortality has remained constant, incidence rates rose sharply around 1990, declined gradually from 1992, and began to rise again in 2005. Let me explain why such a wave has occurred. The mechanical scan by water imaging method was developed in 1965, and thyroid cancer screening has been carried out in Nagano and other prefectures since 1980. At that time, thyroid cancer was detected in 1 out of every 300 people. Later, a high-frequency transducer was developed using a polymer compound as a material, and the frequency was increased from 5 MHz to 7.5 MHz, which improved the spatial resolution. A high-speed mechanical sector equipped with a high-frequency transducer was developed. This method produces ultrasound images in real time. In 1987, the development of annular array probe dramatically improved the spatial resolution. As a result, thyroid scintigraphy and soft X-ray, which had been considered the standard examination methods, were eradicated. Based on our evaluation of usefulness of real-time thyroid ultrasound, we began screening for thyroid cancer by ultrasound during breast screening by ultrasound at the Ibaraki Medical Center in 1985. Screening for thyroid cancer showed a high detection rate of 0.7%. The age distribution showed a sharp increase in the detection rate after the age of 30 years, reaching a plateau at the age of 50 years. This pattern was similar to that of the Finnish autopsy prevalence rate of thyroid cancer. Arak reported that autopsy showed that thyroid cancer occurred in 25% of the population, but at that time there were 350 deaths per year from thyroid cancer in Japan. We concluded at that time that ultrasonography was the best screening method for thyroid cancer, but that there was a large discrepancy with the clinical mortality rate, and that further investigation of the indication for surgery was necessary. At the 55th meeting of the Japan Society of Ultrasonics in Medicine, we reported 39 cases of thyroid cancer out of 3,811 asymptomatic patients. the detection rate was 1.02%. Naturally, the detection rate of 1.02% was controversial. Professor Watanabe pointed out that if this data is true, it is pandemic and advised us to be careful about overtreatment. Based on this data, we reached a consensus that there was a possibility of overdiagnosis and overtreatment of thyroid cancer in adults. And thereafter, screening for thyroid cancer was not promoted and was not actively performed. In the 1990s, an integrated circuit for beamforming was developed, and the whole world entered the digital era. The ultrasound system also developed into a full digital system that converts analog signals to digital signals immediately after reception and performance, focusing by improving the performance of central processing. Again, look at the change in the image. You will see that the resolution is gradually improving. I myself was invited to Belarus in 1995 to give a lecture and practical guidance on thyroid ultrasound. Based on my experience of overdiagnosis and overtreatment in Japan, I mentioned the possibility of overdiagnosis and overtreatment after the nuclear power plant accident, but at that time I did not get any support from any doctors in Belarus. Furthermore, the availability of thyroid ultrasound in general ultrasound system has led to the screening of thyroid cancer during abdominal or carotid ultrasound examinations. Incidentally detected microthyroid cancers were treated surgically without taking advantage of the overdiagnosis debate around 1990, resulting in a gradual increase in the incidence of thyroid cancer. Concerned about this tendency, Dr. Takebe published innocent carcinoma, which is a small thyroid cancer detected by ultrasound screening, and to some extent, ultrasound screening and surgery for thyroid cancer were suppressed in Japan. On the other hand, in Korea, ultrasound screening for thyroid cancer has been implemented with public support since 1999, and this has led to a significant increase in the incidence of thyroid cancer throughout the country. Then, in March 2011, the meltdown of a nuclear power plant exposed many people in the surrounding area to radiation. In that year, the Japan Association of Breast and Thyroid Sonology put the response to the Fukushima nuclear accident on the agenda at its board meeting in July of that year. Ultrasonologists were aware that overdiagnosis by ultrasound had occurred in women over 30 years of age, but there was no evidence of this in children, although it was assumed and it was thought that thyroid cancer in children would be rare. However, I myself assumed that the high incidence of thyroid cancer in children after the Chernobyl accident was due to bias caused by overdiagnosis of thyroid cancer by ultrasound. Thyroid cancer that develops clinically as a result of radiation exposure occurs after 5 years at the earliest. In my opinion, the introduction of ultrasound after 5 years would result in a rapid increase in the incidence of thyroid cancer and would provide the public with false information that thyroid cancer was caused by exposure to radiation, which could lead to overtreatment. In view of this, the board of directors agreed that it is necessary to conduct surveillance before thyroid cancers caused by radiation exposure are detected by ultrasound to obtain a baseline of the natural incidence of thyroid cancer. This surveillance project was established under the leadership of Professor Shinichi Suzuki of Fukushima Medical University. In conducting this surveillance, we have stated our intention to limit the prior screening to the area surrounding the nuclear power plant to avoid overdiagnosis and oversurgery. However, in the absence of definite level of radiation exposure, the issue of radiation damage was taken up by the national government and the Fukushima government as part of the prefectural health survey, and in view of the incidence of thyroid cancer in children following the Chernobyl accident, a plan was drawn up to monitor the health of children throughout their lives. This plan, which was larger than expected, was expanded against its will to include large-scale screening for thyroid cancer for all prefectural residents who were under the age of 18 at the time of the accident. Otsuru and Midorikawa analyzed the incidence of thyroid cancer by age group in a project of the prefectural health survey. They found that the incidence of thyroid cancer increased with age. This phenomenon is different from that of Chernobyl. These results indicate that thyroid cancer in Fukushima developed spontaneously over a period of several years, independent of radiation exposure. It is assumed that thyroid cancer in children does not occur only in Fukushima, but also in other parts of the world. Can we describe the thyroid cancer in children in Fukushima as a pseudo-endemic disease? The slide shows the result of thyroid cancer screening carried out in Fukushima Prefecture. The report shows that the highest detection rate were observed in the preliminary tests conducted in 2011 and 2012, immediately after the nuclear accident. This was followed by a gradual decline in the second and third rounds. This indicates a relatively high frequency of thyroid cancer already in childhood and slow development. The detection rate of thyroid cancer by thyroid screening in Japan in the 1980s and the current detection rate of thyroid cancer in children are plotted by age. Thyroid cancer develops gradually and frequency is likely to reach a plateau at age 50. In view of the above, I believe that childhood thyroid cancer in Fukushima is a naturally occurring cancer that has been detected more frequently with the introduction of ultrasonography and is not caused by exposure to radiation. I would like to propose that this is not an endemic disease, but a pseudo-endemic disease caused by advanced ultrasound technology. Now, everyone should stop and consider the overdiagnosis and overtreatment of thyroid cancer with our autonomy and regulation. It is true that meticulously conducted screening data has been scientifically organized and is an unprecedented achievement. While I understand the desire to further refine the results of this research to perfection, I would like to see a return to the starting point of carving over diagnosis and over treatment, which is feared to continue in the future. I myself regret that my initial suggestion of screening to carve over treatment led to overdiagnosis and overtreatment. The physicians involved in this project should follow the Declaration of Helsinki, exercise autonomy, and terminate screening of the thyroid gland by ultrasonography as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your attention. The Fukushima Prefectural Health Survey project has produced the following major scientific results. 1. A high rate of lymph node metastasis was observed in children with thyroid cancer even at very early phase. 2. The incidence of thyroid cancer was not accelerated by the Fukushima nuclear accident. 3. The natural occurrence of thyroid cancer in children was clarified. 4. To prevent misinterpretation of the threshold values of effective and equivalent doses for carcinogenesis.